Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to our reviews of the Rogue Squadron original four-book series from Michael Stackpole. This is the final one, the Bacta War. We're going to be talking about it non-spoiler here in this video for those of you who haven't seen it or just want to know our thoughts. But don't click off if you're interested in spoilers, because we do have an upcoming live stream from our Star Wars Legends Book Club series we've been doing for the last couple years. For those of you familiar with our channel, Legends Book Club used to be longer 25 to 45 minute reviews of Star Wars books. We'd go really in depth and talk about all these different things, spoiler filled. Well, we've decided to switch the format. We're giving you guys these video reviews of these books so you guys can check out our thoughts initially, but then we hope you join us live to discuss all of these Star Wars books in full spoilers, where we can really have a great discussion about all of these great Legends books. So hopefully you guys join us. Mark it on your calendars, December 11th, and check out our other 3 reviews we just did for Rogue Squadron across the entirety of the series. It will be linked into the cards in the playlist, so make sure you check that out, as well as reviews for Wraith Squadron. We have the entire trilogy of reviews on the channel as well. All right, without further ado, let's get into the final book in the original 4-book Rogue Squadron series from Michael Stackpole, the Bacta War. Sanak, I'm going to pass it over to you. What were your thoughts on the Bacta War? And specifically, as we always do, we start with the writing, the plot, and the way this story was constructed.
Now, I'm not typically someone who just loves like the perfect happy ending of sorts, but I don't know, there's something about this book that really got me invested from the start. I think it's because all the threads have been leading up to this final confrontation, and how it played out wasn't too slow, it wasn't too fast, and a lot of nice conclusions for sure. So I think that's why kind of the happy endings felt earned for me, especially because most of them were character focused. And I think this also features a couple of the more interesting dogfight battles. You know, we have the original Rogue Squadron book, and I think there you get to see a little bit more what's going on inside of the X-Wings. Here you kind of take a step back and see, hey, this is a war. What are like the tactics like? Who's coming into play here and all that? So definitely a big fan of that. And I like that this almost kind of does a lot of setup for Rogue Squadron's involvement in the Thrawn trilogy, a little bit more why they're working almost in sync with a lot of the underworld and just how personal it gets in some cases. So yeah, definitely a big fan of that. I really liked how the rogues, now that they aren't technically with the New Republic, are like, yeah, we're gonna see this through. This is our mission. We're gonna make sure that we get everything that we need out of Isard, out of Irisi, out of Thyferra, out of any other obstacles in the way, and make sure that this is done. This is a threat that no longer causes so much chaos and unsettling feelings for the New Republic, as it's really trying to get its feet underneath it. Obviously, things get a little bit bigger and crazier in the rest of the EU lore pretty quickly after this, but for at least this group and their battles that they've been fighting for well over a year now, yeah, I think it was really handled well. I really liked a lot of like the dynamics with their families that came into play here, and I just loved a lot of this insurgency stuff on Thyferra, especially. I thought that was where a lot of the stories in the previous books didn't necessarily land, because sometimes they do something really great in space or in a ship, but not so much on the land. And then when the land stuff was great, maybe not so much space. I felt like every level here was great. And it also had some very small but notable subplots that really led itself to a really, really highly detailed final battle that puts this final book to, a nice cherry on top.
Yeah, this is certainly the most action-packed of all the Rogue Squadron books. If Rogue Squadron is Top Gun, if Wedge's Gamble is an espionage story, if the Kratos Trap is a political thriller, this might be the one that's the most Star Wars of all of these books. This is high-flying action. It's the core group of characters really locked in, ready for battle, ready to end it with the villain. And I think this is really like a New Hope level Star Wars broken down at its base. It's a dogfights, it's excitement, it's fun, and there are still layers and there's still depth here, But for the most part, I would say this is truly about the head to head between Rogues and Isard. And if you're down with that, if you feel like you've gotten all of the character development you've needed from the other books, this is the one for you to just sit back, stuff popcorn in your face, really, and just be like, let's watch it all unfold. And I'm not saying that as a negative, really, about Stackpole's writing. This is still a really exciting book. There's a lot of great action sequences. There are twists and turns. There are great character developments for our leads like Corrin and Mirax and Wedge and Tycho. But this is the one to me that has the least specific notable genre to pull from and say that's what he's emulating. This is just a pure Star Wars book, and in that vein it is very, very fun. But you can see Stackpole's mastery of writing dogfights here. This is one of his best dogfight writing books. You can see the thing that inspired him basically to go into this series, and in a lot of ways this is finally a connection back to the style of Rogue Squadron, brought in with now having met and gotten to know all of these characters and really fallen in love with all these characters. We have our lines drawn. There's a clear side, and we're excited to see how some of the traitors get their comeuppance, how some of the evil villains have to go head to head with our main heroes. And there is a level of interest around the politicking of the New Republic at the time here. There are some things around the politics here that I found actually quite interesting. A lot of the military politics as well. You mentioned the Thrawn trilogy, and some of those politics definitely play into a lot of the military tactics and a lot of the military dealings in this book. And I thought that was quite interesting. You can kind of see a nice circular loop for characters like Akbar and Phalia and those types of characters with where they ultimately are and how they're all at odds with each other in the Thrawn trilogy. And Bacta War does a really strong job with all of those plot lines in kind of the vein we see with a lot of these X-Wing books. The final book has to now take all the fun ideas that we had prior, all the interesting ideas, and somehow connect it to the rest of the EU. And the Bacta War does a really good job of that in this final novel. So let's talk about those characters, though, because like I mentioned, this is a smaller cast of characters that gets a time to shine. Everybody's still here. You still have all the fun of the Rogue Squadron crew, but this does hyper focus on our leads. This is, once again, a Corrin, Wedge, Mirax, and then the others book. And with that, you do get a lot of interesting things around Corrin and Mirax, their relationship, and the family dynamic that Corrin is thrust into, which plays a big role in the Bacta War. Sanak, when you're looking at the characters that are in the Bacta War, which ones stood out to you and which were some of your favorites?
Well, I definitely like the new triangle replacing Irisi between Corrin and Mirax because now he added in Booster. And Booster is, oh man, he's a lot. I mean, he's physically pretty intimidating, like his eye socket kind of replaced and all of that. And I mean, this has been something that's been building throughout the books. I mean, in essence, being part of the Corellian force means you're just a space cop. And that's what he's always kind of been. And Booster was arrested by Corrin's father. So it's like, all right, well, Mirax and him is like a bit of a forbidden relationship. What happens once Booster is actually freed and he's on his own and out about in the galaxy again and finally runs into these two lovers? It's hilarious. It quite honestly is hilarious quite often. But you do also see like a lot of the tension and a lot of the hurt of like legacy and like what these two men are holding on to instead of embracing what is in front of both of them. And I thought that was probably one of the better ways of writing their dynamic. It also really helps that Talon Card kind of can come in and push and pull where needed. He's a bit of a smart aleck. He knows exactly what he's doing, why he's doing it, and that everyone knows that he's the most dangerous man in the room. And I really did enjoy seeing that. Obviously, Corrin and Mirax, their dynamic is on full throttle here, full display. Everything about them is clicking, it works, and they make a really good team. I think I had some doubts in the start at Rogue Squadron. Wedge's gamble definitely eased all those concerns. And then seeing how their separation and then reconnection between Kratos Trap and Bacta War plays out was really, really sweet. And I definitely liked a lot of their ending moments. I mean, I also really like the Darklighters. That is a bit of a smaller sequence and is, again, kind of tied into the logistics that you're talking about. Like, how does this Rogue Squadron figure out how to keep things on board and keep things fueled and get a safe base and supplies and all that? And it works because you bring in the Darklighter, so you deal a little bit with, of course, one of my favorite characters, Biggs Darklighter, and his legacy there, while Gavin is growing into what his father is like and what his uncle is like. And yeah, it was pretty fun seeing them. And then I really like Gavin's father having a moment with Corrin where you realize even though Corrin, for the most part, everything is going pretty great for him, there are still things that he just isn't comfortable with. Like he hasn't learned to ever embrace even as a child, or he's at least locked away in his adulthood, especially with the death of his father. And now embracing the sense of family again is a difficulty. And I think that was a really nice way of kind of bridging a little bit more of the Rogue Squadron to him directly. Oral, he's just hilarious because now he's got these watchers literally hyping up his legacy, being like, all right, if it all works out, you can be able to say your first name and refer to yourself in the personal pronoun singular POV instead of third person, right? And it's like, it's just such a fun, interesting, and like a silly little bit for an alien culture that I think is handled pretty well. And I do like a lot of the Ashern and the Radix stuff and kind of with insurgency with Ayala. I think what she's doing with a couple of the other people that been hired to like cause chaos in Thyferra is very cool, especially how she's reacting after her husband's death because of the brainwashing done on the Lusankia by Isard. So that was pretty good. Irisi and Voru is twisted because they both feel like they're like using each other, manipulating each other, and there's this weird emotional, physical relationship that they're both possibly open to. But at the same time, it's like they're both doomed. There's no way this will work for them, and there's no way it'll work with Cornhorn and everyone breathing down their necks. And I mean, yeah, they both have some very, very interesting endings for sure. Seryanku, the guy who has strangest, smallest subplot about just being a guy with a star destroyer, patrolling the outer rims, and like hooking up with the wife of Amoth, and then how he comes into play with that final battle. It shouldn't work with how little of a pages that he has in the book, but it worked for me. I don't know what. I think it was just the timing and everything was really good, and it kind of played into how this book had a lot of stuff unexpectedly happening in the dogfights, the stuff around Alderaan and all that. So yeah, I just really like the characters in this book.
Yeah, they all stand out very strongly. For me, the standout is Booster. I love Booster in this book. He is such a welcome addition, and he works just top to bottom. Works. It works with Cornhorn, especially knowing deeper in the EU where this whole thing works. I love the initial onsets of their rivalry around Mirax. I think perfectly you described it as kind of a love triangle because it is. It's the love of a father for his daughter, now with the man that is the son of the person he hates most dating her. You're going to have some really fun scenes, and Stackpole doesn't shy away from that. He gives us a lot of great fun scenes. Wedge is also really strong in this book, as always. Say that every book, but he works really well. And Tycho, the aftermath of what happens in the previous book, plays really well for both of those characters, and I did enjoy seeing their journeys continue and unfold in the way it does here. But I did want to get into Ayala because Ayala is a character we haven't talked about that much throughout these reviews, and we really should talk about her more because she does have a really interesting slow growth throughout this series. And when we get to this book, she is such a strong character, and the way her and Wedge play off each other as well. There's a good dynamic there, and I did really appreciate that character. So that's another great character here. And Isard, the way this all wraps up, Isard lives up to the hype as the villain. I thought Isard overall is my favorite villain of the entire X-Wing series, and Isard does deliver on that level for a final book, a 4-book build. She is worth it here. The final battle is certainly a good one, and Isard is a strong part of why this series works and why the threat of Isard continues to build book after book after book. So I really dug what they did here with the characters. I think overall most of them are really strong. Oral is another one. Oral has a big plot line in this, and it is fairly fun. But the rest of the crew is there. They're just not quite on the same level. I would say though, Gavin is the other one, like you mentioned earlier. Gavin and Asir, they have great moments. There are character moments in here, but the side characters don't drive the plot like they did in the third one. This is our core characters driving home the finale of this series, and it still does work really, really well. Okay, so to move on now, we are going to give you our final thoughts and score out of 5. Sanak, what would you give Bacta War out of 5?
For me, the Bacta War was a really, really fun, pleasant read. It is very much popcorn and pulp all put together. I know it's not anything substantially impressive when it comes to what the writing is about, but the plotting and the build up for 3 books really is well earned and well played off. Like you said, the villains are great. The underworld coming into play here and how the New Republic sort of plays nice with them, sort of doesn't. Especially as when they get a little bit more of a foothold and the last third of the book, it's pretty interesting to see. I love that characters like Tycho get to have a little bit more of time unlocking their past selves and who they are and what that means moving forward. Especially now that they're the Rogue Squadron, and that final battle is impressive to say the least. Multifaceted, multiple fronts, a lot of twists and turns there. Everything worked for me. I was a big fan of it, so for that reason, I'm gonna give it a 3.75.
Yeah, this is a strong ending, and I think in all the best ways possible. It is a culmination of the entire series. It plays heavily on the things we've seen in the past for characters, but focuses on the core, giving us strong character moments and defining moments for those core characters, delivering strong villain moments, giving us fun side character moments, even if they aren't as prominent, while also introducing characters like Booster who really get a big time to shine in a story like this. There's a lot of great things to love about Bacta War. At times, it can be slightly overstuffed, but for the most part, Stackpole handles it with relative ease. This is a great conclusion, and you can't necessarily just judge this book on its own. It is the finale of a 4-book series, and as that finale, I think it more than lives up to the excitement of the previous 3. So I'm going to give this another 4 out of 5. I think this is another really good book, and certainly one of the better concluding chapters in the EU. So thank you so much for watching our reviews of every single X-Wing book in the first 4 of the Rogue Squadron series. We do have reviews up for the other 3 from Wraith Squadron, and then we will eventually be reviewing Isard's Revenge, Starfighters of Adamar, and Mercy Kill eventually one day, probably waiting to coincide with the Essential Legends releases. But let us know what you thought of this book down in the comments below, or if you're checking it out for the first time, let us know what you thought of our review. Make sure, again, to mark your calendars, December 11th, we will be doing our live Legends book club for all 4 of these X-Wing books. So come and join us, talk about these books, and let's talk about some Star Wars Legends. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we will see you all next time.